The melody drifted through Isaac Patterson's apple orchard on that blistering August morning in 1882. So pure and unexpected that he froze mid-stride with his pruning shears still raised toward a wayward branch. He had lived alone on his ranch outside Jamestown, California, for 3 years now, and in all that time, the only sounds that had greeted him were the whisper of wind through leaves, the occasional bark of his dog, and the relentless silence of his own solitude. This voice, however, this haunting tune that seemed to float between the rows of trees like morning mist, belonged to something he had almost forgotten existed in the world. Isaac lowered the shears slowly, his weathered hands trembling slightly. He was 32 years old, though the California sun and hard work had etched lines around his eyes that made him look older. His ranch sprawled across 200 acres of rolling hills, with the apple orchard occupying the sweetest piece of land, where a natural spring kept the soil rich and dark. He had bought this place with money saved from years of cattle drives and ranch work, dreaming of building something permanent, something he could pass down to children he did not yet have. But then, Martha had changed her mind 3 days before their wedding, running off with a banker from San Francisco, and Isaac had thrown himself into work with such fervor that he had nearly forgotten what it felt like to hear another human voice on his property. The humming grew louder as he moved toward it, weaving between the apple trees heavy with fruit that would be ready for harvest in another month. His boots crunched softly on the grass, and he tried to move quietly, afraid that whoever was making this beautiful sound would startle and flee like a deer. The morning sun filtered through the leaves in golden shafts, and somewhere nearby his dog Rex was probably sleeping in the shade of the barn, useless as ever when it came to alerting him to visitors. She stood beneath the oldest tree in the orchard, her back to him, wearing a faded blue calico dress that had seen better days. Her dark hair fell in a thick braid down her back, and her hands were raised as if conducting an invisible orchestra, while she hummed a melody that Isaac vaguely recognized as something his mother used to sing when he was a boy. The woman swayed slightly as she hummed, completely absorbed in her music, and Isaac found himself rooted to the spot, unwilling to break the spell. Then she turned, and the humming stopped abruptly. Her eyes went wide with surprise and then fear, and Isaac realized with a start how this must look, a strange man standing there watching her. She took a step backward, nearly stumbling over an exposed root. "Wait," Isaac said, holding up his free hand, the other still clutching the pruning shears. "I am sorry. I did not mean to frighten you. This is my orchard. I heard singing and came to see who was here." The woman's chest rose and fell rapidly, her hand pressed against her heart. She looked to be in her mid-20s, with large brown eyes that held equal parts terror and something else Isaac could not quite identify. Exhaustion, perhaps, or desperation. "I apologize, sir," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I did not realize this was private property. I was just passing through and the trees looked so lovely, and I have always found comfort in singing. I will leave immediately." She moved to walk past him, but Isaac shifted to block her path, then immediately regretted it when he saw the fear flash across her face again. "No, please," he said quickly, lowering the shears completely and setting them on the ground to show he meant no harm. "I am not angry. In truth, I cannot remember the last time I heard music on this ranch. It was quite beautiful. Are you traveling somewhere?" The woman hesitated, her eyes darting past him as if measuring whether she could run if needed. Up close, Isaac could see that her dress was travel-stained and torn in places, and there were dark circles under her eyes that spoke of many sleepless nights. A carpet bag sat at the base of the tree where she had been standing, and from the looks of it, That was all she owned in the world. "I am going to Jamestown," she said finally. "To find work, perhaps, or to Sacramento if there is nothing here. I apologize again for trespassing." "From where?" Isaac asked, genuinely curious now. Something about this woman tugged at his heart in a way he had not felt in years. Maybe it was her obvious vulnerability, or maybe it was simply the fact that she had brought music to his silent world, but he found himself wanting to help her. She looked down at her hands. "From everywhere and nowhere, I suppose. I have been traveling for several weeks now. Before that, I was in Virginia City, Nevada, but circumstances made it necessary for me to leave rather quickly." Isaac understood what she was not saying. A young woman alone in a mining town like Virginia City would have faced all manner of difficulties and dangers. The fact that she had made it this far on her own spoke to either great courage or great desperation, possibly both. "My name is Isaac Patterson," he said, taking a gamble. "This is my ranch. I grow apples mostly, though I have some cattle and chickens as well. I live alone here, and I was actually thinking this morning that I could use some help with the harvest coming up. I do not suppose you would be interested in honest work for fair wages." The woman's eyes met his, searching his face for any sign of deception or ill intent. Isaac held her gaze steadily, letting her see that he meant what he said. "What kind of work?" she asked carefully. "Cooking, mostly," Isaac said, thinking quickly. "I am a terrible cook, and I have been eating beans and salt pork for so long I can hardly remember what real food tastes like. Also help with the harvest when it starts, and general household work. There is a small cottage on the property, separate from the main house, where my foreman used to live before he moved to town. It is empty now, and you would be welcome to stay there. I would pay you $25 a month plus room and board." It was a generous offer, perhaps too generous, and Isaac could see the suspicion return to the woman's eyes. $25 was more than most ranch hands made, and considerably more than most women could earn doing domestic work. Why would you offer this to a complete stranger? She asked bluntly. "You know nothing about me. I could be a thief or worse." Isaac smiled slightly. "You could be, but I do not think so. Anyone who sings like that while standing in an apple orchard has too much beauty in their soul to be truly bad. Besides, I am a good judge of character and I am lonely enough to take the risk. What is your name?" She studied him for a long moment, and then her shoulders relaxed just a fraction. "Victoria Chambers. Most people call me Vicky." "And I will accept your offer, Mr. Patterson, on the condition that you understand I will leave immediately if anything untoward happens." "I would expect nothing less," Isaac said, relieved beyond measure. "And please call me Isaac. Come, let me show you the cottage and get you settled." "When did you last eat a proper meal?" Victoria hesitated, then admitted. 3 days ago. I had some bread and cheese, but it ran out yesterday." Isaac's heart clenched. "Then the first order of business is to get some food in you. The cottage can wait until you have had something to eat and drink. Come up to the house." He picked up his pruning shears and gestured toward the path that led through the orchard to his ranch house. Victoria retrieved her carpet bag, and they walked in silence through the dappled shade. Isaac found himself intensely aware of her presence beside him. The way her dress rustled as she walked, the way she kept stealing glances at the trees and the sky as if memorizing every detail. The ranch house was a sturdy 2-story structure that Isaac had built himself with help from hired men during his first year on the property. It had a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides, a shake roof, and windows with real glass that he had hauled all the way from Sacramento. He had built it large enough for a family, and the empty rooms upstairs were a constant reminder of dreams that had not yet come true. "Rex," His blue heeler dog came bounding around the corner of the house as they approached, barking enthusiastically. Victoria tensed, but Isaac called out, "Rex, down!" And the dog immediately settled, though his tail continued wagging furiously. "He looks fierce, but he is actually useless as a guard dog," Isaac said with affection. "He likes everyone." Victoria knelt down and offered her hand to Rex, who sniffed it eagerly and then licked her fingers. She smiled, and Isaac felt his breath catch at the transformation in her face. When she smiled, she was absolutely radiant. Inside, the house was clean but sparse, with simple furniture that Isaac had made himself or purchased from the general store in Jamestown. The kitchen was the largest room, with a good iron stove that he had saved for months to buy, a pump that brought water directly from the well, and a large table that could seat 8 but usually only held 1. "Sit," Isaac said, gesturing to the table. "I will make you something. It will not be fancy, but it will be filling." Victoria sat down gratefully, setting her carpet bag beside the chair. Isaac busied himself at the stove, frying eggs and thick slices of ham, toasting bread and brewing coffee. He was not lying when he said he was a terrible cook, but he could manage breakfast well enough. As he worked, he kept stealing glances at Victoria, who sat very still with her hands folded in her lap, looking around the kitchen with an expression he could not quite read. When he set the plate in front of her along with a steaming cup of coffee, she looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You are very kind." "No need to thank me," Isaac said, sitting down across from her with his own plate. "Eat as much as you want. There is plenty more." Victoria ate slowly at first, as if remembering her manners, but as the food hit her empty stomach, she began eating faster, clearly ravenous. Isaac pretended not to notice, focusing on his own meal and thinking about what needed to be done to prepare the cottage for her. It had been empty for nearly a year since his foreman had decided to move into Jamestown to be closer to his aging mother. The place would need airing out, fresh linens, and probably a good cleaning. "This is delicious," Victoria said between bites. "You said you were a terrible cook, but this is wonderful." Isaac laughed. "Eggs and ham are about the extent of my skills. Wait until you taste my attempts at pie or stew, and you will understand what I mean. That is why I am hoping you know your way around a kitchen better than I do." "I do," Victoria said. "I worked as a cook in Virginia City for a while at a boarding house. Before that, I cooked for my family back in Missouri. It is one of the few skills I have that is actually useful." "How did you end up in Virginia City?" Isaac asked, then immediately worried he was being too nosy. "I am sorry, you do not have to answer that if you do not want to." Victoria took a sip of coffee, her eyes distant. "It is all right. It is not much of a story, really. My parents died of fever when I was 19. My older brother inherited the farm, and his new wife made it clear she did not want me around. I had always wanted to see the West, so I used what little money I had to come out here. I thought I could find work easily, maybe even find a husband and build a life. But it turns out the West is not quite as full of opportunity for women as the stories make it sound. I am sorry about your parents," Isaac said sincerely, "and about your brother. Family should take care of each other." "Should, yes," Victoria said with a sad smile. "But sometimes what should be and what is are two different things. Anyway, I do not regret coming west. I just regret some of the choices I made along the way. Virginia City was not a good place for me. The boarding house owner was kind enough, but some of the men who stayed there were not, and one of them started making threats when I refused his advances. So I left in the middle of the night and started walking. I have been on the road ever since, taking odd jobs where I could find them, sleeping rough when I could not. Isaac felt a surge of anger toward the man who had threatened her, followed by profound gratitude that she had somehow found her way to his orchard. "You are safe here," he said firmly. "I give you my word. No one will bother you on my property, and if anyone tries, they will answer to me." Victoria looked at him for a long moment, and something shifted in her expression. Trust, perhaps, or at least the beginning of it. "I believe you," she said softly. After breakfast, Isaac showed Victoria to the cottage, which was situated about 50 yards from the main house, nestled among a grove of oak trees. It was small but well built, with 2 rooms, a main living space with a fireplace, and a separate bedroom. The furniture was basic but functional. A bed, a table with 2 chairs, a rocking chair by the fireplace, and a dresser for clothes. "It needs work," Isaac said apologetically, looking at the dust that covered everything. "I should have kept it cleaner, but I did not expect to have anyone living here again so soon." "It is perfect," Victoria said, and she sounded like she meant it. "I have lived in much worse places, believe me. Give me some rags and water, and I will have it clean in no time." "I will help you," Isaac said. 2 sets of hands will make it go faster." They spent the rest of the morning cleaning the cottage together, and Isaac found himself enjoying the work in a way he had not enjoyed anything in a long time. It felt good to have someone to talk to hear the sound of another voice besides his own thoughts. Victoria was easy to be around, with a quiet competence that spoke of years of hard work. She did not complain or ask for special treatment, just rolled up her sleeves and got to work. As they cleaned, they talked. Isaac learned that Victoria was 26 years old, that she loved to read but had not owned a book since leaving Missouri, and that she had once dreamed of becoming a teacher. Victoria learned that Isaac had been working ranches since he was 14, that he had spent 5 years driving cattle up from Texas, before saving enough to buy his own land, and that he had chosen this particular spot because the orchard reminded him of his childhood home in Tennessee. "Why apples?" Victoria asked as she wiped down the windows, letting sunlight stream into the cottage for the first time in months. "My grandfather had an orchard," Isaac said, sweeping the floor. "I spent my summers there as a boy, climbing the trees and eating so many apples I would make myself sick. When I decided to buy land, I knew I wanted to grow something that would last, something I could tend for years and watch grow. Cattle come and go, but a good apple tree can live for decades if you care for it properly." "That is beautiful," Victoria said, and she sounded like she meant it. "Most men I have met only think about how much money they can make as quickly as possible. It is nice to meet someone who thinks about building something lasting." "Money is important," Isaac admitted, "but it is not everything. I want to build something here that matters, something I can be proud of. Though I will admit it has been lonelier than I expected, doing it all by myself." Victoria glanced at him, her expression thoughtful. "I suppose that is why you were so quick to hire me. You were looking for company as much as help." Isaac felt his face heat. "I suppose so," he admitted, "though I truly do need help with the harvest, and I really am a terrible cook." "So it is not entirely selfish." Victoria laughed, and Isaac felt something warm unfold in his chest at the sound. When was the last time someone had laughed in his home? When was the last time he had laughed? By noon, the cottage was clean, and Isaac had made up the bed with fresh linens from his own closet. He left Victoria to unpack her meager belongings while he returned to the main house to put together some lunch. This time he was more ambitious, making sandwiches with fresh bread he had bought in town 2 days before, along with pickles from the barrel in his cellar, and the last of a jar of peach preserves his neighbor Mrs. Henderson had given him. When he returned to the cottage with the food and a pitcher of cool water from the well, He found Victoria standing in the doorway, looking out at the view. From here, you could see across the orchard to the hills beyond, where the summer grass had turned golden and a few scattered oaks provided shade. "It is beautiful here," she said without turning around. "Peaceful. I think I could be happy in a place like this." "I hope you will be," Isaac said, meaning it with all his heart. He set the food on the small table inside and poured 2 glasses of water. "Come eat. You must be hungry again." They ate together in the cottage, and Isaac found himself telling her about his plans for the ranch, things he had never shared with anyone because there had been no one to share them with. He told her about wanting to expand the orchard, maybe add pear trees and cherries. He told her about his dream of buying more cattle and building up a proper herd. He told her about the loneliness that sometimes felt like a physical weight on his chest, especially in the long winter evenings when darkness came early, and there was nothing to do but sit by the fire and think. Victoria listened without interrupting, and when he finally stopped talking, embarrassed that he had said so much, she simply nodded and said, "Thank you for trusting me with your dreams. I will do my best to help you achieve them." Over the next few weeks, a routine developed between them. Victoria would rise early and come to the main house to prepare breakfast. Isaac would join her in the kitchen, and they would eat together while planning the day's work. Then Victoria would handle the household chores, cooking, cleaning, laundry, while Isaac worked in the orchard or with the cattle or any of the 1,000 other tasks that came with running a ranch. But Isaac found himself inventing reasons to be near the house more often, to pass by the kitchen windows where he could hear Victoria humming as she worked. She sang constantly. He discovered old ballads and church hymns and songs he had never heard before. The sound transformed the ranch, filling the empty spaces with life and joy. In the afternoons, when the heat grew too intense for heavy work, Isaac would take a break and find Victoria in the kitchen or the garden she had started planting near the cottage. They would sit in the shade and talk, or sometimes just sit in comfortable silence. Isaac taught her about apple varieties and how to tell when fruit was ready for harvest. Victoria told him stories about growing up in Missouri, about the neighbors who had become like family, about the brother she had once loved before his wife turned him cold and distant. At night, after dinner, Isaac would walk Victoria back to her cottage, Rex trotting alongside them. Sometimes they would linger outside, looking up at the stars that seemed impossibly bright out here away from any town. Isaac would point out constellations his father had taught him, and Victoria would share the folk names her mother had used for different stars. "That one there, the bright one, my mother called it the wish star," Victoria said one night, pointing. "She said if you made a wish on it and truly believed, it would come true." "Have you made a wish?" Isaac asked, acutely aware of how close they were standing, how the moonlight turned her hair silver. "Many," Victoria said softly. "Most of them have been for simple things, safety, food, a place to rest. But tonight I think I would wish for something different." "What would you wish for?" Victoria turned to look at him, and even in the dim light he could see the emotion in her eyes. "I think I would wish that this could last, that I could stay here and keep hearing the sound of the trees rustling and wake up knowing I am safe. That I could keep cooking in your kitchen and singing in your orchard and sitting with you under the stars. Is that too much to wish for?" Isaac's heart hammered in his chest. "No," he said, his voice rough. "That is not too much. In fact, that is exactly what I have been wishing for too, though I did not quite realize it until you said it." They stood there for a long moment, something passing between them that was too fragile and new to put into words. Then Victoria said good night and slipped into her cottage, and Isaac walked back to the empty house feeling like something fundamental had shifted in his world. As summer wore on, and the apples grew heavy on the branches, Isaac found himself falling in love. He had not planned for it, had not even thought himself capable of it after Martha broke his heart, but there it was. He loved the way Victoria hummed while kneading bread dough. He loved the way she laughed at Rex's antics when the dog tried to herd the chickens. He loved the way she stood in the orchard in the early morning, her face turned toward the sun, looking completely at peace. But he said nothing, afraid to ruin what they had built. Victoria seemed happy here, seemed to have found the safety and peace she had been searching for, and Isaac did not want to drive her away by pushing for something more. So he kept his feelings locked away and tried to be content with her friendship. Victoria, for her part, was equally silent about her own growing feelings. She had come to Isaac's ranch expecting nothing more than temporary refuge, a place to catch her breath before moving on. But somehow days had turned into weeks, and the thought of leaving made her chest tight with panic. She had come to love this place, with its rows of apple trees and rolling hills, the cottage that felt more like home than anywhere she had lived since leaving Missouri. More than that, she had come to love Isaac. She loved his kindness and his quiet strength, the way he treated her with respect and never made her feel lesser for being a woman alone in the world. She loved how hard he worked and how much he cared about building something lasting. She loved his rare smile and his even rarer laugh, and the way he listened when she talked as if her words truly mattered. But she said nothing, afraid that he saw her only as an employee, afraid that admitting her feelings would force her to leave the first place that had felt like home in years. The tension between them built slowly, a low hum beneath their daily interactions. They grew more careful around each other, more aware of accidental touches and lingering glances. The air seemed to crackle when they were together, charged with unspoken words and unnamed feelings. Then came the day in late August when the first apples were ready for harvest. Isaac and Victoria worked side by side in the orchard, filling baskets with fruit that was perfectly ripe, the skin glossy and red. Victoria had tied her hair back with a ribbon and wore one of her simpler dresses, and Isaac thought he had never seen anything more beautiful than her reaching up into the branches, her face flushed with exertion and joy. "Try this one," he said, picking an apple and polishing it on his shirt before handing it to her. "This is from the tree you were standing under the day we met. It is my favorite in the whole orchard." Victoria took the apple and bit into it, and her eyes widened. "Oh," she said. "Oh, that is incredible. I have never tasted anything so good." Isaac grinned, pleased. "Right? That tree is almost 50 years old. The man I bought the property from said his father planted it. I have tried to propagate from it, but the grafts never quite take. That tree is one of a kind." "Like you," Victoria said, and then immediately looked embarrassed. "I mean this place, the ranch. It is unique." But Isaac had heard what she said first, and his heart was racing. "Victoria," he started, then stopped, not sure how to continue. She looked at him, the half-eaten apple still in her hand, and something in her expression gave him courage. "I need to tell you something," he said, setting down his basket. "And if it makes things awkward, I apologize, but I cannot keep it to myself any longer. These past weeks with you here have been the happiest I can remember in years. You have brought life back to this place, brought music and laughter and joy. And somewhere along the way, I have fallen in love with you, completely and utterly in love. I know I have no right to say this, that you came here for safety and honest work, not for declarations from your employer. But I had to tell you because keeping it secret was killing me." Victoria stared at him, and for a terrible moment Isaac thought he had made a horrible mistake. Then her face broke into the most radiant smile he had ever seen. "You love me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Yes," Isaac said simply, With all my heart." Victoria dropped the apple and closed the distance between them in 3 quick steps, throwing her arms around his neck. "I love you too," she said, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "I have loved you for weeks, but I was afraid to say anything, afraid you would send me away if you knew." Isaac wrapped his arms around her, holding her tight, hardly able to believe this was real. "Send you away?" "Victoria, I have been trying to figure out how to ask you to stay forever, not leave." She pulled back just enough to look up at him, tears streaming down her face. "Forever, if you will have me," Isaac said. "I know this is fast, and I know we have only known each other a short time, but I feel like I have been waiting for you my whole life. You are the reason I built this house so big. You are the reason I planted these trees and dreamed of something lasting. I just did not know it until you walked into my orchard humming." Victoria laughed through her tears. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will have you. Yes to forever. Yes to everything." Isaac kissed her then, gently at first and then more deeply, and it felt like coming home after a long journey. The sun was warm on their backs, the apple trees rustled around them, and somewhere nearby a bird sang its afternoon song. Everything was perfect. They were married 3 weeks later in the church in Jamestown, with half the town in attendance. News had spread quickly that the lonely rancher had found himself a bride, and everyone was curious to meet the woman who had captured Isaac Patterson's heart. Mrs. Henderson, Isaac's nearest neighbor, took charge of organizing the reception, declaring that she had been trying to marry Isaac off for years and was not going to let this opportunity pass without a proper celebration. Victoria wore a dress that Mrs. Henderson and several other women from the church sewing circle had made for her, a beautiful confection of cream-colored silk with lace at the collar and cuffs. Someone had donated their mother's wedding veil, and another woman had brought flowers from her garden. The women of Jamestown had adopted Victoria as one of their own, touched by her story and charmed by her sweet nature. Isaac wore his best suit, which he had owned for 3 years but had worn only twice. He stood at the altar watching Victoria walk down the aisle toward him, and his heart was so full he thought it might burst. She was beautiful, yes, but more than that, she was his partner, his love, his future. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. They exchanged vows in voices that trembled with emotion, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Isaac kissed Victoria to applause and cheering from the assembled guests. Outside the church, people threw rice and offered congratulations, and Isaac felt embraced by the community in a way he never had before. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and more food than 2 people could eat in a month. There was music and dancing, and Isaac surprised everyone, including himself, by being a competent dancer when Victoria pulled him onto the makeshift dance floor. They whirled around under the late summer sky, and Isaac could not remember ever being this happy. As the evening wore on and guests began to leave, Isaac and Victoria stood together on the porch of the main house, waving goodbye. When the last wagon had disappeared down the road, Victoria turned to Isaac with a smile. "Ready to start our life together, Mr. Patterson?" "I have been ready since the moment I heard you humming in my orchard, Mrs. Patterson," Isaac replied, and swept her up in his arms to carry her across the threshold. Their first months of marriage were blissful. They settled into an easy partnership, working together to run the ranch and prepare for the coming winter. The apple harvest was the best Isaac had ever had, and he credited it entirely to Victoria's presence, claiming she had brought good luck along with her beautiful voice. They sold most of the apples in Jamestown and Sacramento, making enough money to see them comfortably through the winter with some left over to save. Isaac was already planning for the spring, talking about buying more cattle and maybe some sheep, expanding the ranch now that he had a partner to help him. In the evenings, after the work was done, they would sit together in the parlor. Sometimes Victoria would read aloud from books Isaac bought for her in town, and sometimes she would simply hum while Isaac whittled or mended tack. The house that had once felt too large and empty now felt exactly right, filled with warmth and life. Winter came early that year, with the first snow falling in November. Isaac and Victoria spent their first Christmas together snowed in for 3 days, and Isaac declared it the best Christmas of his life. They roasted a goose Victoria had raised from a chick, made pies from preserved apples, and exchanged simple gifts. Isaac gave Victoria a music box he had ordered from San Francisco, which played a melody similar to the one she had been humming the day they met. Victoria gave Isaac a scarf she had knitted in secret, working on it by candlelight after he had gone to bed. As winter turned to spring, Victoria began to suspect she was pregnant. She waited to be sure before telling Isaac, and when she finally shared the news one April morning over breakfast, he let out a whoop of joy that scared Rex half to death. He picked her up and spun her around the kitchen, laughing and crying at the same time. "A baby," he kept saying. "We are going to have a baby. Victoria, you have made me the happiest man in California." "I am happy too," Victoria said, her own eyes wet with tears. "I never thought I would have this. A home, a husband who loves me, a baby on the way. It is more than I ever dared to dream." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Victoria continued to help with the lighter ranch work, though Isaac fretted constantly that she was doing too much. She laughed at his worrying but secretly loved how protective he had become. Mrs. Henderson and the other ranch wives visited regularly, bringing advice and baby clothes and casseroles, making sure Victoria knew she was part of their community. In late October, as the apples were ripening on the trees for the second harvest since Victoria had arrived, she went into labor. Isaac rode into town at breakneck speed to fetch the doctor and Mrs. Henderson, then paced outside the bedroom for hours while the women attended to his wife. Every cry from Victoria made him flinch, and he found himself praying more fervently than he had since he was a child. Finally, just after midnight, he heard the sound he had been waiting for, the thin, angry wail of a newborn baby. Mrs. Henderson emerged from the bedroom a few minutes later, her face wreathed in smiles. "Congratulations, Isaac. You have a fine, healthy son." Isaac practically ran into the bedroom, where he found Victoria propped up against the pillows, exhausted but glowing, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. She looked up at him with such love and pride that Isaac felt his knees go weak. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Isaac approached the bed carefully, as if sudden movements might break the spell. He looked down at the baby in Victoria's arms and felt his heart expand in a way he had not thought possible. The baby was tiny and red-faced, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that seemed to be trying to focus on this strange new world. "He is perfect," Isaac whispered, reaching out to touch one impossibly small hand. The baby's fingers wrapped around his, gripping tight. "Absolutely perfect." "What should we name him?" "I was thinking William," Victoria said. "William Henry Patterson, Will for short. What do you think?" "I think it is perfect," Isaac said. "Just like you, just like everything about this life we have built together." The years that followed were full and rich. William grew into a sturdy, happy child who loved following his father around the ranch and listening to his mother sing. When he was 3, Victoria gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah, and 2 years after that, another son they called James. The ranch house that Isaac had built too large was suddenly just the right size, filled with the sounds of children playing and laughing. The ranch prospered as well. Isaac expanded the orchard and added pear and cherry trees just as he had planned. The cattle herd grew, and he hired on 2 ranch hands to help with the work. Victoria managed the household and the growing family with grace, and somehow still found time to sing in the orchard when the spring blossoms covered the trees like snow. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Isaac took Victoria back to the spot in the orchard where they had first met, where the old apple tree still produced the sweetest fruit. The children were with Mrs. Henderson for the afternoon, and it was just the 2 of them, standing under the branches heavy with ripening apples. "You remember the song you were humming that day?" Isaac asked, holding both of Victoria's hands in his. "I do," Victoria said, smiling. "It was an old hymn my mother used to sing. 'Come thou fount of every blessing.' Would you sing it for me now?" Victoria's voice rose sweet and clear, the same melody that had drawn Isaac to her a decade before. But now, instead of being tinged with loneliness and uncertainty, her voice was full of joy and contentment. Isaac listened with his eyes closed, remembering the lonely man he had been and marveling at the life he had now. When the song ended, he pulled Victoria close and kissed her forehead. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what? For finding your way to my orchard, for staying, for loving me, for giving me everything I did not know I needed." Victoria smiled up at him. "I am the one who should be thanking you. You saved me, Isaac. You gave me a home when I had nowhere to go, and you gave me a love I never thought I would find. Every day I wake up grateful that I wandered into this orchard and started to sing." "The song led me to you," Isaac said, "and you led me to joy." They stood there together under the apple tree, holding each other as the afternoon sun filtered through the leaves, and in that moment, everything was exactly as it should be. The lonely rancher had found his love, the wandering woman had found her home, and together they had built something that would last for generations. Years continued to pass, each season bringing its own rhythm to the ranch. The children grew tall and strong, learning to ride horses and climb apple trees, to work hard and to find joy in simple things. William showed a talent for working with animals and talked of becoming a veterinarian. Sarah inherited her mother's beautiful voice and could often be found in the orchard, singing to the trees as her mother had done. James was the dreamer, always with his nose in a book, talking about becoming a writer and recording the stories of the West. Isaac and Victoria grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. They had their challenges, as all couples do. There were seasons when money was tight, years when the harvest was poor, times when sickness touched the family. But through it all, they faced everything together, their bond strengthened by trials rather than weakened. On their 20th anniversary, Isaac surprised Victoria with a gift that made her cry. He had hired a carpenter to build a small gazebo in the orchard, right next to the tree where they had first met. It was a beautiful structure with a peaked roof and lattice walls where climbing roses would eventually grow, and inside was a bench just large enough for 2. "This is our place," Isaac said, leading her inside. "Whenever things get hard or you need a moment of peace, you can come here and remember the day our story began. You can sing to your heart's content, and I will always be able to find you." Victoria threw her arms around him, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gesture. "How did I get so lucky?" she asked through happy tears. "I think luck had very little to do with it," Isaac replied, holding her close. "I think it was something much bigger than that. Call it fate or providence or whatever you like, but I think we were always meant to find each other." As the children grew into young adults and began building lives of their own, Isaac and Victoria found themselves with more time to focus on each other again. They took to spending long summer evenings in the gazebo, talking about everything and nothing, holding hands and watching the sun set over the hills they had called home for so long. William went off to study veterinary medicine in San Francisco, sending letters home every week about his studies and adventures in the city. Sarah married a kind young man from Jamestown who worked at the bank, and they built a house just a few miles from the ranch. James indeed became a writer, publishing stories in magazines, and eventually writing a novel based on his family's history that became quite popular in California. Through it all, the orchard remained the heart of the ranch. Isaac and Victoria continued to tend it together, even when their backs grew stiff and their hands developed arthritis. The trees they had planted in the early years of their marriage grew tall and strong, and they added new trees for each grandchild that was born. Sarah gave them 3 grandchildren, William had 2, and James eventually married and had 4 of his own. On quiet days, Victoria would still walk through the orchard humming, and Isaac would stop whatever he was doing to listen, his heart swelling with the same love and wonder he had felt that first day. The song that had brought them together remained a thread woven through their entire lives, a reminder of grace and unexpected blessings. When Isaac turned 65, he decided it was time to slow down and let William take over the main operation of the ranch. William had returned from San Francisco with his degree and a passion for improving ranch operations, and Isaac was more than happy to hand over the reins to his capable son. But he and Victoria stayed on the ranch, living in the main house that held so many memories, still tending their beloved orchard. One spring morning, when the apple blossoms covered the trees like pink and white clouds, Isaac and Victoria celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary. Their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a huge celebration, with tables set up under the trees and music and laughter filling the air. As the sun began to set, Isaac stood up and called for everyone's attention. The crowd quieted, and he reached for Victoria's hand, pulling her to her feet beside him. 40 years ago, Isaac began, his voice still strong despite his age, I was a lonely man working this ranch by myself, wondering if I had made a mistake trying to build something on my own. Then one morning, I heard the most beautiful sound I had ever heard in my life. I followed that sound into this orchard, and I found this incredible woman, humming under that apple tree right there. He pointed to the ancient tree, which was still producing fruit after all these years, its gnarled branches now supported by careful props. I did not know it then, Isaac continued, but that moment changed everything. Victoria did not just become my wife, she became my partner, my best friend, the mother of my children, and the love of my life. She turned this ranch into a home and taught me what it means to truly live. Everything good in my life can be traced back to that morning when I heard her singing. Victoria's eyes were wet with tears as she looked up at him. Isaac turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "You led me to joy," he said softly, echoing the words he had spoken years before. "And you have kept me in joy every single day since. I love you, Victoria Patterson. Thank you for wandering into my orchard all those years ago." The gathered family erupted in applause and cheers. Victoria stood on her tiptoes to kiss Isaac, and their children and grandchildren crowded around them with hugs and congratulations. Later that evening, after the celebration had wound down and the last guests had departed, Isaac and Victoria walked hand in hand to their gazebo. They sat on the bench, Victoria leaning against Isaac's shoulder, both of them tired but happy. "You ever regret it?" Isaac asked quietly. "Staying here, building this life with me? You could have kept traveling, seen more of the world." Victoria laughed softly. Not for one single moment. This ranch, this life with you, our children and grandchildren, all of it has been more than I ever dreamed possible. I found exactly what I was looking for that day I walked into your orchard. I found home. So did I, Isaac said, kissing the top of her head. So did I. They sat there in comfortable silence as night fell around them, the orchard dark and peaceful, the stars beginning to emerge in the sky above. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, and closer by, an owl hooted from its perch in one of the oak trees. The sounds of the ranch at night, familiar and comforting after all these years. "Will you sing for me?" Isaac asked, as he had asked countless times over the decades they had spent together. Victoria's voice rose sweet and true in the darkness. The same hymn she had been humming that first day, the song that had led a lonely rancher to the love of his life. Isaac listened with his eyes closed, his hand holding Victoria's, and thought about all the years they had shared, all the memories they had made, and all the love that still filled his heart to overflowing. The song that had brought them together had led them through 40 years of marriage, through joy and sorrow, through triumph and challenge, and it had never stopped bringing them back to this essential truth. They belonged together. Two souls who had been searching for home and had found it in each other. As Victoria's voice faded and silence settled over the orchard once more, Isaac squeezed her hand gently. "Again," he whispered, and she laughed and began to sing once more. And under the stars, in the orchard they had tended together for 40 years, surrounded by the family they had built and the life they had created, Isaac and Victoria sat together and let the music wash over them, grateful beyond measure for a chance encounter and a wandering song that had changed everything. Years continued to unfold in a gentle rhythm. Isaac and Victoria grew older but never apart, their love a constant in a changing world. They watched the 20th century dawn, saw automobiles arrive in Jamestown, witnessed their grandchildren grow and marry and have children of their own. Through it all, the orchard remained, lovingly tended by successive generations of Pattersons, each one taught to respect the land and remember the love story that had started it all. The old apple tree, the one under which Victoria had been standing that fateful day, became something of a family shrine. Whenever anyone in the Patterson family faced a difficult decision or needed comfort, they would go sit under that tree. There was something special about that spot, something that seemed to radiate peace and hope. Isaac and Victoria had shared their story so many times that even the youngest grandchildren knew it by heart. How the lonely rancher had heard a song, how the wandering woman had found safety, how love had bloomed under these branches. On their 50th anniversary, the entire extended Patterson family gathered once again. There were now so many of them that they could barely fit on the ranch property, even with all its acres. Children ran through the orchard laughing, teenagers helped set up tables and chairs, and adults gathered in small groups exchanging news and catching up. It was a beautiful chaos that made Isaac's heart swell with pride and gratitude. Victoria had grown frailer in recent years, her steps slower and more careful, but her spirit remained as bright as ever. She still hummed while she worked in her garden, still sang in the orchard when the weather was fine. Isaac, though his hair had gone completely white and his back was bent from decades of hard work, still looked at her with the same love and wonder he had felt the first time he saw her. During the anniversary celebration, their children presented them with a special gift. A book that James had compiled containing the family history, filled with stories and photographs documenting 5 decades of life on the ranch. The centerpiece of the book was the love story of Isaac and Victoria, written in James's eloquent prose, a tale of 2 lonely souls finding each other and building something beautiful together. Victoria cried as she paged through the book, seeing her life laid out in words and pictures. "Look at all of this," she whispered to Isaac. "Look at what we created. Not just children and grandchildren, but this whole world, this whole family. It is more than I ever imagined." "It started with a song," Isaac reminded her gently, as he had done so many times over the years. "Your song led me to you, and you led me to all of this." As the sun set on their 50th anniversary celebration, Isaac and Victoria made their way slowly to the gazebo in the orchard. Their children and grandchildren followed at a respectful distance, wanting to be near but understanding that this moment belonged to the two people who had started it all. Isaac and Victoria sat on the bench that had been replaced several times over the years, but always in the same style, always in the same spot. They held hands and looked out at the orchard, at the trees they had planted and tended, at the family that had gathered to honor them. "I have had a good life," Victoria said softly. "The best life. Thank you for giving it to me, Isaac." "I could say the same to you," Isaac replied, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved me from a life of loneliness and gave me more love than any man deserves. I have cherished every single day with you." As twilight deepened, Victoria began to sing, her voice wavering with age but still beautiful, still full of the joy and faith that had sustained her through all the years. The family gathered closer, drawn by the sound, and soon others joined in, their voices blending in harmony. The song rose up through the apple trees, into the darkening sky, a hymn of gratitude and love that seemed to sanctify the very ground they stood on. Isaac closed his eyes and listened, surrounded by his family, holding the hand of the woman he loved, and felt complete. Everything he had worked for, everything he had dreamed of, had come to pass. The lonely rancher had found his joy, and that joy had multiplied and spread until it touched dozens of lives. In the years that followed their 50th anniversary, Isaac and Victoria slowed down even more, spending most of their time in and around the main house and orchard. They had lived full, active lives, and now they were content to sit and watch the world continue around them. Their children and grandchildren visited constantly, and there was always someone dropping by to share a meal or ask for advice or simply sit with the family matriarch and patriarch. Isaac passed away peacefully in his sleep one autumn night, just after the apple harvest had been completed. He was 78 years old, and he died as he had lived his last 50 years, with Victoria by his side. She held his hand through that last night, singing softly to him, the same songs she had sung in the orchard all those decades ago. When the sun rose and Isaac did not wake with it, Victoria kissed his forehead and whispered, "Thank you for everything, my love. Wait for me." The funeral was one of the largest Jamestown had ever seen. Isaac had been a pillar of the community, a successful rancher, a generous neighbor, and a devoted family man. But more than all of that, he had been a man who loved deeply and well, and that love had touched everyone who knew him. Victoria continued on without him, though a light had gone out of her eyes. She still walked through the orchard when the weather was good, still hummed the old songs, but there was a sadness to her now that had not been there before. She missed Isaac with an ache that never fully went away, but she found comfort in their children and grandchildren, in the life they had built together, in the knowledge that their love story had been complete. 2 years after Isaac's passing, on a beautiful spring morning when the apple blossoms were at their peak, Victoria asked William to help her walk out to the gazebo. She wanted to sit in her special spot and enjoy the day. William settled his mother on the bench, made sure she was comfortable, and then reluctantly left her alone when she asked for some time to herself. Victoria sat in the gazebo, looking out at the orchard that had been the center of her life for more than half a century. She could almost see Isaac among the trees, young and strong, his face lighting up the first time he heard her sing. She could remember so clearly the feel of his hand in hers, the sound of his laughter, the way he looked at her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "I am ready now," she said softly to the empty air, though perhaps not so empty after all. "I am ready to come home to you." She began to hum and then to sing, her voice growing stronger as she sang the old hymn that had brought her and Isaac together so long ago. The apple blossoms drifted on the breeze like snow, and the spring sun was warm on her face, and everything was peace and light. That is where William found her an hour later, sitting on the bench with a smile on her face, looking as serene as if she had simply fallen asleep. Victoria had passed quietly, surrounded by the orchard she loved, with a song on her lips and peace in her heart. They buried Victoria next to Isaac on a hill overlooking the orchard, under the shade of an oak tree. The entire family gathered once more, this time to say goodbye to the woman who had been the heart of their family, the source of so much love and strength. As they lowered her casket into the ground, Sarah began to sing the old hymn, and one by one, every member of the family joined in, their voices rising in the spring air, a final tribute to the woman whose song had started it all. In the years that followed, the Patterson family continued to tend the ranch and the orchard, passing it down through the generations. The gazebo became a place of pilgrimage for family members, who would come there to think or pray or simply sit in silence. The old apple tree, against all odds, continued to produce fruit, and it became tradition to save the apples from that tree for special occasions, to make pies for weddings and births and anniversaries. The story of Isaac and Victoria became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. It was a story of faith and hope, of second chances and unexpected blessings. It was a story about how a simple song could change everything, about how love could transform loneliness into joy, about how two people could build something lasting that would touch lives for generations to come. And on quiet mornings in the orchard, when the mist hung low over the grass and the birds were just beginning to sing, some claimed they could hear it. A faint humming, beautiful and pure, drifting through the apple trees. Whether it was memory or imagination or something more, no one could say for certain. But it always brought comfort, that sound, a reminder that love does not end with death, that the songs we sing echo far beyond our own lifetimes, that joy, once found, remains forever. The orchard stood as testament to all of this, to Isaac's dreams and Victoria's song, to the family they had created and the love they had shared. Generations of Pattersons would walk among those trees, would pick fruit from branches planted by hands long since stilled, would sit in the gazebo and remember the story of how it all began, with a lonely rancher, a wandering woman, and a song that led them both to joy. And so the story ended as all good stories should, with love triumphant, with family thriving, with a legacy that would endure. The lonely rancher had found the woman humming in his orchard, and her song had led him to joy. But more than that, their love had created joy for countless others, spreading out in ripples that touched generation after generation, a testament to the power of love, music, and faith. The orchard still stands today, lovingly maintained by Patterson descendants who understand that they are guardians of something more than just land and trees. They are guardians of a love story, of family history, of a reminder that even in the hardest times, grace can find us in unexpected ways. That sometimes all it takes is being open to possibility, being brave enough to offer help to a stranger, being willing to follow the sound of a song into an orchard on a summer morning. And if you visit that orchard on just the right kind of day, if you sit very still in the gazebo and listen carefully, you might hear it too. A song carried on the wind, sweet and pure and full of joy, a reminder that love endures, that beauty remains, that the best stories are the ones written by hearts brave enough to hope and hands willing to work and souls open to the possibility of grace. This is the story of Isaac Patterson and Victoria Chambers, of how they found each other and built a life together, of how a simple song in an apple orchard changed everything. It is a story of the Wild West, of California in the late 1800s, of hard work and simple faith and enduring love. But most of all, it is a story about how the lonely can find connection, about how the lost can find home, about how a single moment of courage or kindness can ripple out across decades and shape the lives of people not yet born. The orchard remembers. The family remembers. And the song plays on, generation after generation, a melody of hope and love that will never truly end.